The intermediary solution that the Liberal government has offered is a loan with interest to be paid later. Is that a real solution for this?
No, that's a horrible Band-Aid.
It's like a Band-Aid, but it didn't treat the actual problem, and right now that's a big gaping hole, and we're bleeding.
I have to make enough money to pay back a loan. A loan is a Band-Aid on a big cut.
How can you pay off a loan if you're not making any money?
The U.S. is waiting for Canada. Is that what you heard?
Yes.
Today, Mark Carney said Canada is working with the United States and Mexico to modernize CUSMA and provide greater certainty for workers and businesses. But yesterday, we were actually on the ground at the Canadian Association for Mold Makers annual general meeting, talking to the very people that are actually paying the tariffs, and they told us that they have no certainty. They also told us the exact same thing that the U.S. ambassador told CTV, and that the Mexican Secretary of Economy told their mainstream media, that Canada has been absent from the negotiating table. Let's take a look.
Our existing free trade deals already provide access to 1.5 billion consumers. We're now on track to double that market this year with deals from India to ASEAN. Despite challenges, Canada maintains the best deal of any major U.S. trading partnership, with 85% of our trade remaining tariff-free. We're working with the United States and Mexico to modernize CUSMA to provide greater certainty for workers and businesses and to create lasting prosperity across the continent.
That was Mark Carney today talking to reporters, and he's trying to tell everybody that we've never had it so good, despite the fact that they're blaming the United States for all of the economic problems that are happening in Canada. So, while other countries are doing just fine and other G7 countries are not in a recession, don't have the inflation that we do, and don't have the food inflation that we do, somehow all of our economic woes are attached to the United States, which simultaneously they say is giving us the best deal in the world. But I want everybody to put this into context and what Mark Carney said while you're listening to these business owners and business people that are in the very industry that we've been talking about, that nobody else has been talking about for the last couple months, because they were hit by these 232 tariffs that came into effect on April 6, 2026, and the government effectively did nothing. And what these tariffs did was they took an environment and an industry where they were having to pay a tariff on the amount of steel that was actually in a product to the entire value of the product. So imagine going from paying maybe a couple $100s on a product to, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars, or in some cases, $100,000 on a product when you're only making single-digit margins. What's the point of doing business when every single product that you sell, you're selling at a loss? And then the government responded with a loan, and we covered that in an earlier video, which said, well, we'll give you a loan so you can pay the tariff, but then later on you'll have to pay the interest on that loan. So they can't even afford to pay the tariff right now, but you want them to take a loan for it that they're going to have to pay the government back, and then charge them interest on top of that, putting them even further behind the eight ball. So we asked the business owners, does this make sense? Is it helping? We talked to MP Kathy Borelli and got her take on this, as well as some of these other industry folks. And we also asked the executive director of the Canadian Association for Mold Makers, is Canada actually even at the negotiating table? And she confirmed what we reported on yesterday. So there's been chat about the committee testimony that you played a part in a couple months ago. There was some visibility that was brought to this issue. The government made an announcement about loans with deferred interest payments. Let's just ask the question, is that going to address the problem?
It's kind of like, if you were shot with a bullet, right, and you stuck a Band-Aid on it, It'd probably stop the bleeding. It probably won't save your life, but it might buy you some time until you can get to a hospital and get the real treatment you need. So, although loans are good, it's not gonna close that wound that we've got bleeding right now. And let's be totally frank, that bullet, it could finish us off, right? So I really believe that the loans that's a good way to describe it. It's like a Band-Aid. But it didn't treat the actual problem, and right now that's a big gaping hole, and we're bleeding.
So I guess the silver lining, if there is one, is back when these committee meetings were happening, if nothing was done, we were looking at weeks for some companies, months for others before they either shut their doors or moved to the United States. I guess to your point, that's stop the bleeding, maybe give them a little more breathing room. But what's the reaction around the industry? Is this, if a deal doesn't get done with the United States, what are we looking at now?
Well, let's deal with the first part. Nobody's excited about taking loans, right? You're talking about companies that are already very leveraged, right? If they're leveraged, that means they're already paying loans, they're paying debt down. Their balance sheets probably don't look great. And now what just happened is profitability is under attack, right? So if you take a company that's already leveraged and their profitability is under attack, they don't have a lot of extra money to pay off loans. So that's why the loan's really not exciting. We don't know all the details about how the loan will be treated. We do know that it's not necessarily cheap. We're hoping that it'll be forgiven at some point, but they're not saying that. So we're not saying that that's a great solution. What we do believe is a great solution is a trade deal. We saw some great information today at the CAM AGM that there is so much investment that's sitting on the sidelines. We can see that. We know that in our industry and the automotive industry, these industries only survive by continual investments. It's like this perpetual investment that has to happen all the time, right? And if investment's not happening, an industry starts to stand still. And when an industry starts to stand still, it's not long before they disappear, if you know what I mean, right? So if they're not investing in new plants, if they're not investing in new technology, likely somebody else is in another part of the world, and then that industry in the space that's not investing will disappear. What we saw today, no investment in Canada, no investment in the United States, and surprisingly enough, no investment in Mexico. That's got to be really alarming to not only people like us who depend on those industries for growth, because nobody's going to buy my molds or parts if they're not investing in new plants, but the governments. That's what blows my mind. Who in their right mind think this is a good idea? There's no investment happening anywhere. So it's not working anywhere, right? So we really need a trade deal so that we can unlock all that investment, because we know it's sitting there. It's trillions of dollars. We're not talking millions, billions. We're talking trillions of dollars are just sitting there waiting for a home. My prayer and my hope is that lands in North America. But the longer that we don't get a trade deal, the less likely it lands here, and it lands in another country who, I'm going to be honest with you, is far scarier, far meaner, and a little shorter, and they're on the other side of the ocean.
Well, and just from a business standpoint, just so our viewers fully understand this. So, number one, these companies taking loans, that's increasing their debt position. Mm-hmm. That compromises their ability to potentially get further financing from other banks down the road, because you have a larger debt position that impacts your credit and your risk profile for these banks. And when we're looking at the investment, our viewers need to understand that this isn't just a bottomless pit that money is flowing into. You're talking about the fact that this is such a competitive industry that there's continual investment and a attempt to gain a competitive advantage around the world from these different companies. So there's always innovating technologies that are being invested, and in innovating processes. It's a never-ending race, which is why that investment needs to come.
Yeah, I remember the decision I had to make a long time ago was that I was never going to stop investing in my business, right? So we've had to make some tough decisions in, let's say, the last 12 months, right? We've had to make decisions on, do we continue to invest in our business, even though we know that we're looking at a potentially unprofitable year, right? That's what the tariffs did. You took an entire industry, like you said, that has to continually invest, and now all of a sudden you took profitability away, right? That's huge. Because when you take profitability away, you take away security, and we know without security equals investment.
Right.
So what this loan, like if I look at this loan, we're going for the loan because we have to. Not because we want to, because we have to. Because I looked at the next, 6 to 18 months, and we are no longer a profitable business, right? But I also know I have to continue to invest. I still have to pay payroll every Thursday. I still have to pay suppliers, even though I'm, facing a 10% or maybe a 15% tariff. And let's keep in mind, it starts at 10 to 15%. If we get to January 1, 2028, it turns into 25% tariff. And I've told people that's the death blow.
And then we're in a position of essentially abdicating our national security to countries that we are concerned about national security with, because these countries are going to be the ones that have the industry, that make the things, that make things, and that just is not good news. And it's a terrifying prospect for our manufacturing sector if it even remains.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, Ryan. And the one thing that makes me really mad is that they talk about protecting the cattle industry, right? Because we have supply management, and they're trying to protect the wheat industry, right? Because they think that we're going to run out of food. Well, what are they going to do when they don't have any equipment to be able to refine the wheat or to deal with the cattle, right? What are they going to do if all that machinery and those molds for all those plastic parts you do disappear? If you lose your industry that supports your defense industry and disappears, what are you going to do? Are you going to rely on the enemy to provide that? Because I'm going to be honest with you, if you let our industry disappear, the rest of it all goes with it. I've told many people, they said, are you the roots of the tree? I said, no, we're the trunk. We are what everything else grows off of, right? Our workforce is the roots, but we're the trunk that keeps all of those industries still going. If you let that trunk start to wither away, the tree dies. And the Canadian government really needs to understand that. I know we're a raw resource-based country, and that's the way they see Canada, but we are a manufacturing juggernaut. The rest of the world envies what we have, but it's very delicate. And in a short period of time, it could disappear. And I think that they're thinking they're helping, but they really need to understand that they need to just get a deal done. Buy us some time, but buy us, 3 to 6 months. There's nothing beyond a year and a half.
The mold makers said in the study, they were very clear, we just want to see an agreement with the United States on tariffs. We just need to know what the goalpost is. We need some certainty. If we know that a deal has been made, we will run our businesses to make ourselves successful with the deal that's made. Just tell us what the plan is.
One of the biggest problems I saw with the government's solution is that, sure, they're going to provide loans to pay the tariffs. That doesn't get rid of the tariffs. But if the company is already going to be losing money on paying the tariff in the first place, and then they're going to have to pay back this loan, and then interest on that loan later, they're losing even more money just at a later date. So how does this make sense at all to address the problem?
It doesn't. With tariffs the way they are, the mold makers cannot make money when they are shipping to the United States. They will lose money every time they ship something there. How can you pay off a loan if you're not making any money? It makes absolutely no sense.
Many of your members testified at committee a few months ago, and we covered that. The main message that we heard out of that is they need a deal with the United States because that's where over 80% of their business is in some cases. What they received in response was a loan program through the BDC that they'll have to essentially get a loan for the tariffs, and then they'll have to pay that back as well as interest at a later date. Is that going to be effective for these companies or no?
We were very vocal at committee and very clear that loans were not the answer, and it's just postponing the inevitable. They needed more support than that. Loans are not going to solve the problem, and they need the U.S. trade agreement. There's no doing this business in other countries like we do with the U.S. There's no making up that 80% somewhere else.
So earlier on, I think Canadians were expecting some sort of trade deal to provide relief for the tariffs. That seems to be now almost irrelevant because now we're into CUSMA talks. Is that the next avenue that the association is hoping where they get this relief?
Yeah, so we still have our fingers crossed that something positive will come. We continue to advocate and raise attention to the industry, the importance of the industry, the importance of business with the U.S., and just the overall importance of the CUSMA agreement on both sides of the border. So it's not just beneficial to Canada, it's beneficial to the U.S. to have access to Canadian manufacturing.
Now, several of your members actually took a trip to Washington to advocate on behalf of the industry. What came out of that?
A lot of information. I would say, maybe too much information. There was a lot of connections and people that we recommended to talk to. And as an association, that's something that we followed up with. So, talking with the U.S. Trade Representative Office, talking to Global Affairs Canada in Washington, and even having meetings with the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, just to communicate on that side of the border why we, should be doing business together.
Now, one of the messages that we've heard from Ambassador Hoekstra is the U.S. is waiting for Canada. Is that what you heard?
Yes. So that is exactly what we heard, is that the U.S. is ready to go to the table, and then they need Canada to come to the table as well to come to an agreement. And that on that side, they didn't feel that was happening. Without the CUSMA agreement, without a fair agreement with the United States, we will lose Canadian manufacturing.
So I work for the Schiller Group. It's Southwestern Manufacturing, Southwestern Nuclear, DMS Components, Border Steel, and SMI Automation. So we've got our hands in a lot of pots.
So how have these tariffs impacted your companies?
I can speak more particularly to the impact on Border Steel. We service the tool and mold industry, so it's had a huge impact on us because a lot of our customers are requiring U.S. certified steel. So you can imagine we had a plate from 3/8 up to almost 9-10 inch thick on our floor, and we have to pivot and spend millions of dollars on U.S. certified steel. If we didn't do that, we couldn't support our area in manufacturing. So obviously we're carrying double inventories. It's very costly. You don't particularly get more margin for that. It costs a lot more per pound. So it's been a huge impact. Our customers are struggling, and most of them all sell these tools that they're making with our steel into the United States, about 80 to 90%. So you can imagine the impact. It's great. It's really great.
And as a result of that business model, they're having to pay the 15% 232 tariff on the entire value of the product now.
Right.
And most of them have single-digit margins. So they're losing money on virtually every product that they sell.
Yeah.
The intermediary solution that the Liberal government has offered is a loan with interest to be paid later. Is that a real solution for this?
No, that's a horrible Band-Aid in my personal opinion. They can't afford to pay this money back. It's money gone, and they're not making any profit. So how are they ever going to recover that money and pay it back? It doesn't make sense at all. I don't know how that's a good idea at all. No, it doesn't help them.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a common reaction from many of the companies around the industry, because if you're not even making, enough when you're paying the tariff, how are you going to pay that back with the interest on top of that, to your point?
Yeah, and you're also paying up front more a heavy cost for the materials that you need from the United States as well. So you can imagine how that trails off their margins almost nothing, and they're just trying to hold on to their customer base and keep the relationships. So they're breaking even, or even in some cases losing money just to hold on. How long can we do this? Not very long.
Now, one of the other suggestions from the government is, well, just diversify your market. Is that easier said than done?
Well, how long does that take?
Right.
That's years in the making to try to execute something like that. It's a great idea in theory, but it's not very easy to do. I think they do have some good systems in place to try to help companies, but that's a long, slow burn. That's not going to help them today when they need to pay their employees and they're struggling. That doesn't help in the moment. So, and we're manufacturers. Automotive is huge in Canada, especially in our Windsor, Toronto area, Quebec. We're really good at manufacturing in automotive. We want to stay there. We have good relationships built already. The business development side, which I quite like the most in my jobs, the business development end, it takes years to really get in a close relationship. So it's not that easy to pivot like that.
So the number one thing that the government of Canada needs to do right now with the United States is what?
We need to make a deal with them, and we need to get this done. We can't afford to keep doing this. And quite frankly, I do work in the Michigan area as well, and I know that they're feeling a lot of pain from this. It's not just us. They're hurting too. I know it sounds rosy. You watch the news and they're doing well. I go and see these businesses all the time. I talk to the presidents and the owners. They're struggling also. This is hurting all of us to keep going this way. So what the answer is, I don't know. I just know we need an answer, and we need it yesterday.
Chris, you testified in Parliament. The government made an announcement. Has anything changed for your company?
Nothing's changed so far. The announcements of the loans didn't make an impact on our business at all.
So Mark Carney had, allegedly taken the results of that study, went back and discussed it with his team, with his cabinet, and came out with his announcement. Why are these loans not making the impact that they might think that they are?
Well, as we testified in Ottawa, the loans for us wouldn't be good for us. I have to make enough money to pay back a loan. A loan is a Band-Aid on a big cut.
Right. And in committee, you were asked point blank, can you diversify to other countries, and can you diversify to China and India and some of these other countries? And your answer was basically that's impossible. Why is that?
To sell a tool to China, impossible is because a China tool is less than half the price of what we build a tool here for. So it's not possible. To sell a tool to India, I go to India. Again, an India tool is not half the price, but close to it. We talked about Europe a little bit, and to get in the European market, which is a very protect yourself market, would take 4 or 5 years and millions of dollars of investment or a big joint venture with somebody. So to diversify from what we do today, what our business is built around, which we talked about, was CUSMA. Long time to get there. A lot of money.
And a long time to get an ROI, if you even get there.
For sure.
So, there's a lot of talk, a lot of stuff in the media now about this. What is your staff and in your company talking about? Are they worried? Are they scared? Are they thinking of, moving on? What's going on?
Oh, geez. Tough question. Are they worried? Everybody's always worried. We don't know what the tariffs look like tomorrow. I'll say, thankfully, I work for a great company. We're a very diversified company already in the mold making industry. We're not so self-reliant on one specific market, and I'll say automotive. I have an owner who's invested back in the company year over year over year to be competitive with China for the last 10 years. 12 years, I'd say, at least 10, 12 years. Without that, we would be in shaky ground. The companies that haven't done that already, I don't know where they'll be. For us, we're in and I said this in Ottawa, we're in a position of strength. We have work. What I don't know is the uncertainty 6 months from now has, 1 year from now has. Right now I have a flat tariff on my tools of 15% on the PO. So how long until my customer gets tired of paying 15% extra? You've made everybody else more competitive by doing that. What it looks like in the future, I don't know.
So the message might be the same, but what is your message to Mark Carney and his government in terms of their response to this, I would call it a crisis for the industry?
Well, a couple things, and if I got to speak with Mark Carney personally, it would first be come to Windsor to a tool shop, not a big three manufacturer, because if my big three manufacturer was going to lose its industry and shut down, I don't know, I think there's 5,000 people in Windsor that work there, he'd be there right away. We have 14,000 people in the mold industry in Windsor. So first, come to Windsor and see what we do. Second would be, please get to the table and figure out with our biggest trade partner. We're partners in success. We're not enemies, we're allies. Treat each other like allies and help not just, this isn't a Windsor problem. This is a manufacturing in Canada. When manufacturing's gone, it's gone.
And this isn't about politics for you. It's not about politics or partisanship or, what party gets the credit. This is about, the future of this industry in Windsor, and also the wider impact on the manufacturing industry in Canada, correct?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So people need to understand that there's these tens of thousands of jobs in Windsor, but if that industry disappears, that impacts 2 million jobs across the country in terms of manufacturing.
Yeah. Again, Windsor's a small area that we have 14,000 mold makers. It's not just mold making though. It's people in Quebec. There's people all over Canada, and again, we lose manufacturing, it is gone. I travel the world. I see what the competition is doing, and I see the investments from other countries, and it'll be very difficult to get it back when it's gone.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't from just conservatives. This isn't from political channels. This isn't from Pierre Poilievre. This is from the people that are living this industry every day. There's about 14,000 jobs in the Windsor area when it comes to just mold makers, about 50,000 when it comes to mold, tool, and die. And that industry affects companies across Canada. This industry feeds the manufacturing sector in Canada as well as the United States. If this industry disappears, it will be an economic bloodbath in Canada. You will see manufacturing jobs disappear overnight. Between 1.4 and 2 million jobs across this country. If we can't even have the products that companies use to make things, how are we supposed to have a manufacturing sector? And if we don't have a manufacturing sector, that means we put the entire country in reliance of countries that are strategic adversaries of us. This is the price of what Mark Carney is doing. And this is the voice of the real people telling Canadians across this country the price of what Mark Carney's non-action is actually having on everyday Canadians.